Persuasive Essay Communications 101. I've always tried to be aware of the products I purchase when it comes to food, because growing up I was surrounded with the notion that certain foods were good and others bad. Today I want to discuss with you the later of the two, the bad, or in this case, genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms are a growing epidemic, one that our government chooses to ignore for the safety of larger production companies. There's little we know about the long-term effects of GMOs on adults and developing children, as well as the effects of genetic modifications on cell structures. Today I'll compare the two largest sides of the argument and review some of the published findings out there on GMOs. The first argument we will discuss are those in favor of GMO productions. The manufacturing companies believe that GMO production will aid in the fight against starvation. They claim that GMOs promote stronger genes and less use of pesticides. And the last argument presented most often by supporting lobbyists is that overall production of GMOs costs less and reduce greenhouse gases while producing higher yield rates. The opposing side argues that GMOs have not properly been tested and government restrictions are lenient. There is strong evidence to support that GMOs have detrimental effect on developing fetuses, and there currently are no laws in place directed towards GMO production in the USA, while GMOs are banned in 46 other countries. Let's now focus on those who support GMO foods. I'll primarily use the arguments of current lobbyists that vote in favor of GMOs. Manufacturers of GMO products include Monsanto, DuPont, and Land O'Lakes, to name some of the largest in the US. Although starvation is a world epidemic, the cause of why is often misconstrued. The world food production level is currently enough to feed 14 billion people, allowing all people on Earth to eat twice their required amount. It is in fact poverty that prohibits individuals' access to food, and corporations such as Monsanto charge inflated pricings on markets they dominate and annually invest a little under $100 million on advertisements directed to promote their products and the idea that there's not enough food out there. Corporations like Monsanto also push to promote their products by making unsupported claims. The first of these claims is something that most people don't hear about, and it must do with genetic manipulation of strains. Certain food products, such as corn and soy, are now dominated by seeds that Monsanto has produced and owns the rights to. In fact, 80% of the market to be exact, and with 80% of the population being genetically similar, it makes them very susceptible to disease. The USDA believes 90% of corn, soy, and cotton are now genetically modified. The second statement made by Monsanto is that their crops require less pesticides. There's two parts to this. The first is that the seeds were introduced and were unfamiliar to pests at the time, but over time, pests developed tolerance. Monsanto farmers now use 16 times the amount of pesticides used before the introduction of GMOs. The second part of this is that Monsanto seeds were first introduced, the plants themselves developed a chemical called Bt, or Bacillus thuringiensis, the leading chemical in Roundup Ready, a household pesticide made by Monsanto. Thus, the FDA classifies it as a pesticide. The last statement I want to discuss is most likely the largest lie of them all, and that is the belief that GMO crops cost less and produce more. When Monsanto first released its seeds in the mid-90s, I'm sure you could have argued they saved you money, but it didn't take long before we saw a 60% increase in cost for Monsanto products, as well as a new contract forcing Monsanto farmers to purchase Monsanto pesticides. This put a lot of farmers in debt, and when the farmers tried to leave their contracts, Monsanto pursued them legally. Much like how their seeds saved money at first, they also yielded more. Sure, at first you can argue that their products, they produced more, since the crops were foreign to pests. But it didn't take long until organic crops caught up. Now, due to the fickle structure of GMO crops, when farmers are under poor weather conditions, often organic crops have shown to be resilient and survive longer, due to the genetic diversity of the plants themselves. I'm sure that, like myself, you're a bit overtaken with what these companies have done to monopolize their market. Their biggest strength is our lack of knowledge as a nation. But now, with the little info I've been filled into you, we can view why the USA looks at these productions and why we look past them. GMOs work and have impacts on living and developing organisms. Those who are skeptic of the impact on GMO foods are not in the wrong. There are many studies done that show how little we know new science that we work with. I feel like we should start with the impact of GMOs on developing fetuses by focusing on mice and rats. A study was done on mice and rats to compare the effects of GMOs to humans. Rats have 97% the genetic code we do. In a 4-month period, one group was exposed to only GMO foods and the other an organic substitute. Those fed GMO foods died within the first 30 days. The mice had bone atrophy and were half the size of the organic counterparts. Mice also showed cases of horizontal gene transfer. The genetic characteristics of the GM feed they consumed was passed on to the animal itself. Their stomach linings began to produce the same pesticides I spoke of earlier. This has been recorded in some livestock on GMO farms throughout a very small number. Roughly 5% of the total population in livestock is affected by this. There is also some cases of human gut lining showing traces of the pesticide. This decision was made in 3 months after GMO public release in 1996. It was immediately approved without any peer review. Monsanto has a legal team of 75 people that handle all legal issues concerning Monsanto. The team is mostly comprised of politicians who supported GMOs and members of the FDA. Large corporations have also forced a hold on the positions that are there to scrutinize them. For example, Michael R. Taylor, a lawyer who started with the FDA, moved into the USDA, then worked as a chief executive for Monsanto, before returning to the FDA and back to the USDA. In other words, he was able to switch between positions, a term which we now call a revolving door position. The largest GMO manufacturers reside in the US, Canada, and UK. Ironically, these are also the only 3 countries that are in favor of genetic modification products. The other 46 countries deemed that there's no point in investing in a product that does not attempt to replace and improve upon the current systems that exist. When it comes to GMOs, most turn a blind eye to it. But this is something that doesn't just impact ourselves. Seeds have been here long before we were. We don't need to be left out of the loop on where our food comes from and how it's made. We can bring the issue to attention very easily. It's unfortunate that companies in this industry can't look past the money involved with food and focus on preserving their client base. If you want to show support, there are many organizations currently that are pushing for change. And some of the ways you can show your support is by taking the time to ask and review the products in which you buy. There are services such as Common Kindness and Amazon Smile that support non-GMO products. You can also join organizations for a more hands-on approach, such as the Non-GMO Project, which helps provide information on GMOs daily. Finally, if you'd rather just try and maintain information on the topic day to day or week to week, follow Institute for Responsibility Technology, which publishes a newsletter on the current information. I'd like to thank you for your time and patience with me as I share with you some of the biggest issues surrounding GMOs currently.